harder the war became, the more the crew became welded together. This comradeship still exists among us after so many years and will probably last as long as we live.
Wilhelm Spahr was an officer on a German U-boat during World War II. Today a resident of Hamburg, he is the managing director of a sailing magazine and vice president of the U-Boat Veterans Association. Basil Bleck was an anti-submarine officer on convoy escort duty in the Atlantic. Today an information officer for the British consul, he is presently on duty in the United States.
The battle for England's lifeline was eventually won by suppressing the U-boat. But it was so long, so dreary, so tedious, and one's part was really very small.
In the danger-filled Atlantic, the lives of Lieutenant Spahr and Lieutenant Bleck crossed. 2 fighting men, 1 German, 1 Englishman. Relive that moment in history. September the 3rd, 1939. The British passenger liner Athenia, torpedoed by a German U-boat, sinks off the North Irish coast. Of her 1,450 passengers, many in flight from the European war zones, 120 perish. The sinking of the Athenia underlines a brutal fact. Although World War II is but a few hours old, the Battle of the Atlantic has begun. Because German naval strength is inferior to that of the British, heavy reliance is placed on the effectiveness of the Unterseeboot, the deadly U-boat. From the beginning, the objectives are clear to the German High Command. England, an island nation dependent on her shipping for survival, must be strangled into submission. Her lifeline severed and her sea power destroyed. British Admiralty, gravely alarmed by the tremendous shipping losses, has resorted to various protective measures. Shipping is rerouted, sailings are made in convoys, new detection devices are developed, and top priority is given to the production of escort vessels. On board a corvette, HMS Bassett is a specialist in submarine detection. 33-year-old Lieutenant Basil Bleck.
When the convoy arrives in Halifax, we generally have a week, possibly 10 days off. There is very little to do. We have parties when we hash over what has happened, where each has been, why so-and-so got lost or off course, and one thing and another of that sort. There is always a feeling of intense depression when the convoy starts off. The captains of all the escort ships are told the course the convoys will sail and the evasive actions to be taken. Some of the convoys are terribly slow, down to about 6 knots, and one wonders if we will ever see land again. The trip just seems to go on and on and on. Submarine warfare is a listening warfare. We are allowed to break radio silence only when we make what is called an enemy sighting report, when we have actually come in contact with the enemy. This quiet is probably one of the worst things for men, being shut off from the world, of constantly having to listen, of having to try and detect the enemy.
Alpha takes its toll of the convoys as they near England after a long, precarious voyage.
We are nearly always spotted, if not attacked. The anti-aircraft cruiser in the convoy tries to fight them off, but quite a number of the ships are hit.
By the summer of 1940, German bomber attacks on shipping turned the English Channel into a death trap. But it is the U-boat alone that in 10 months accounts for more than 400 British and neutral vessels, the equivalent of over 1 million tons of merchant shipping. By December, U-boats have claimed another 300 Allied ships at a cost to Germany of only 24 submarines.
Frequently, after an attack, we are detached to look for survivors. We drop scramble nets down our sides and steam very gently into the area, moving backwards and forwards over the wreckage. Looking for survivors is very depressing. One sees men drowning, and it is too late for help. We are forbidden to put off small boats, and we aren't allowed to stop because we'll present a sitting target. The survivors come alongside, sometimes in boats, sometimes swimming, and then up the side of the ship on these nets.
The year 1941 opens with a series of violent storms at sea. Hitler announces to the Reichstag, in the spring our U-boat war will be renewed, and Britain will notice that we have not been sleeping. German submarine production is 10 boats a month, with major emphasis on Type 7, a 700-tonner. She carries 12 torpedoes, 42 crew members, and can cruise 6,500 nautical miles. The U-47, already famous for sinking the British battleship Royal Oak, is under the command of Lieutenant Prime. Aboard is a young navigator, Lieutenant Wilhelm Spar.
The living conditions are very cramped. We have a great deal of equipment on board. The majority of torpedoes are stored in the bow or in the afterdeck. The men literally sleep on torpedoes. The crew of a German U-boat consists solely of volunteers, and we are proud of this fact. If a U-boat crew is new and inexperienced, the sinking of an enemy vessel is usually very depressing. One starts to think about the meaning of war, but one gets used to a lot of things, even to destruction. possible to help the crew of a sunken vessel without endangering our own men, the surfers. Lifeboats are put out and survivors are rescued and helped in the life rafts. We furnish them with water, food, cigarettes and rum, and we give first aid to the wounded. If possible, we radio a neutral ship in the area. Sometimes we even manage to tow whole crews in their rafts. All this can only take place if the enemy defense does not bother us.
Admiral Karl Dönitz is in command of the German undersea fleet. As the enemy's defense measures strengthen, he devises new battle tactics. He orders the U-boats to extend their searches beyond England's western approaches, to seek out and attack convoys along the Atlantic shipping routes. The first U-boat to sight a convoy radios in the position and course. U-boats in the vicinity rendezvous ahead at a designated point. Then, under cover of darkness, the assembled U-boats close in for the kill. It is the heyday of Die Rudel tactic, the so-called wolf pack technique. As 1941 draws to a close, the submarine can claim another 500 merchant ships sunk in the North Atlantic. The cost to Germany during this year of highly successful hunting, 35 U-boats. Until now, the Germans have been careful to avoid any incidents that would bring the United States more actively into the war. But suddenly, in December of 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. 4 days later, Germany declares war on the United States. The Battle of the Atlantic enters a new and decisive phase. With America's entry into the war, maritime construction soars. Shipyards across the nation turn to the task of creating the largest and most powerful merchant fleet the world has ever known. In spite of this all-out effort, the number of ships being sunk by U-boats is still more than the United States can replace. Lone oil tankers sailing in the heavily populated sea lanes off the North American coast are particularly attractive targets. Admiral Dönitz comments, "Our submarines are operating inshore along the coast of the United States, so that bathers and sometimes entire coastal cities are witnesses to blazing tankers and the drama of war." By the spring of 1942, a coastal convoy system is in effect along the Atlantic seaboard. Protective air cover, along with other defensive measures, forces the U-boats to retire once again to the North and Mid-Atlantic. The great fleets of merchant and troop ships are guided by escorts fitted with sonar and anti-submarine weapons. The carefully regulated formations move at a speed dictated by that of the slowest ship. The zigzag course adds many extra days to the 2 weeks or more at sea. At night, the blacked out and silent ships are a menace to one another, for there is always the danger of collision. Bad weather is another enemy of the convoy. The unpredictable Atlantic is often as deadly as the unseen U-boat below.
Our principal preoccupation is to keep the convoy together. In heavy weather, an attack will not develop, as U-boats sit out storms. It is very rough, very cruel, very uncomfortable. One's legs are bruised from the thigh down because we are continually banging against things, getting thrown this way and that. There is always a senior convoy officer on board a destroyer. We receive messages from him saying that a U-boat pack is lying in a certain area. 2 or 3 of the escort ships are detached and sent to engage the U-boats before they can develop their tactics. We send out a signal and get an echo back. As we move into the attack, the pings shorten. We can always tell by the attack pattern if the contact is near. Explosions block out the echo completely. One always thinks at this moment that one has hit the submarine. But we cannot be credited with a hit unless we can turn up visual evidence, floating debris or oil slicks. One can spot whether the U-boat man is a good man or not by the evasive action he takes. We try to pick up the echo again, we do not.
In the evening, we surface. We have escaped our guard. Ah, but how our poor boat looks. Our compasses do not work. Only by means of the polar star can we make out our directions. Outside Bordeaux, we come across an enemy ship. We submerge and make everything ready for the attack. The enemy comes closer. In our thoughts, we have already sunk the ship. It is like a drill. The ship is in perfect position, and we let our torpedo go. I wait and wait. Nothing happens. It is a circle goer. It is our own torpedo coming back at us. Our torpedo goes right over our heads. The dear Lord has put his big thumb between us and the torpedo. We come to periscope depth. The enemy ship is continuing on its way. We are relieved that all is well. We could attack the ship with our deck guns, but we decide not to. We have lost the spirit.
Strain that comes from spending many weeks at sea under crowded and tense conditions is relieved only when port is reached. There, U-boat crews are treated as heroes and given special consideration. Convoy escorts are strengthened by baby flat tops, new explosives, new types of sonar, hydrophones, hedgehogs, and torpedoes all contribute to the mounting total of anti-submarine measures. Still, U-boat successes reached the highest peak of the war in November 1942. 117 Allied ships are sent to the bottom. It is a figure which conceals the fact that more U-boats are being destroyed than ever before. In February of 1943, the British used a new radar for the first time. It operates on a wavelength of 20 centimeters, which German apparatus cannot detect. By day and by night, unsuspecting submarines are pinpointed and attacked by an enemy they cannot see before it is too late. By June, Allied strength with revolutionary scientific methods has sealed the fate of the U-boat. Of the 235 submarines in action, 84 have been destroyed in the last 3 months. Along with the increase in German losses has been a corresponding drop in Allied sinkings. The hunter has, at last, become the hunted. In 1944, Lieutenant Wilhelm Spar is transferred to Danzig as a technical advisor in the construction of a more powerful type of U-boat. The war's end will find him in a Hamburg hospital. In the winter of 1943, Lieutenant Basil Bleck is assigned to the staff of General de Gaulle's Free French Forces in London. Later, he is transferred to New York as a naval liaison officer. '43 1943 marked the turning point in the Battle of the Atlantic. It was then that the U-boat lost the initiative. Yet many months would pass before peace would return to the neutral sea.